Football is finally here, even if we don't get to see it, but that's because fall camp officially started for the Wolverines today. Let's dig into some of the players that need to have a really good showing in the next month, some of those battles, how I think it's going to shake out. We'll get to that right here on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Wednesday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. Thank you to our everydayers. We appreciate all of you who listen to the show every day, and thank you for making us your first listen. We will start on the offensive side of the ball. The players that need to step up, the position battles, what I think is going to happen in segment one. Then we were going to get to the defense, and then we'll finish out with just kind of general thoughts and some of those kind of fringe players that might be able to that may end up having a little bit more of an impact than you might think. So let's get right into it. Fall camp, it is happening. Obviously, the biggest storyline here is the quarterback battle. Listen, it's a little bit deeper now, right? Because now you do have, because all spring you had just Bryce Underwood and Jaden Davis, and every single person in that building is going to, and that probably includes Bryce and Jaden. They're going to sit there and say, "Oh man, it's an incredible battle." Now we're adding Mikey Keene, Jake Garcia to the mix. It's just going to be that much more, right? Like. I'm not, that's one of those things I'm just not buying. I'm not trying to be disrespectful to the others. It's just, this is more of, it's Bryce's battle to lose, right? And he can. That's something that's in the realm of possibility that can happen, right? Like, Missouri could start speaking English. There's all kinds of things that can happen. I would just be floored if it didn't, I feel like, if Mikey Keene was able to go through spring ball, it would be a different story, because as talented as Bryce is, it wouldn't surprise for them to be like, all right, savvy vet, we're going to pull the Cade McNamara JJ type of thing, and we're just going to kind of ease Bryce in. I think that by him having all of those spring ball practices, practicing with the ones, that just kind of changes the calculus of the situation, right? So, you do have those four guys, Davis Warren coming back from injury. And at least now the floor of your quarterback room has been raised, as well as the ceiling. So that's an excellent place to be, right? Like, Davis Warren, I feel like, can get a lot stronger and better than he was last year. You get better at football by playing football. And once he's healthy, I think the floor of the room is a bit higher. And then you have Mikey Keene, Jake Garcia, and we'll see what Jaden Davis is able to do. Offensive line. I know that there's a lot of people like inserting some drama into it. I don't think it's necessarily as dramatic as people like. I think really that battle for right guard is the one that is going to be the most interesting. Like. Left tackle, I feel like I know like there's people who they look at Andrew Babalola and they get excited, and I think rightfully so. I think Michigan's excited about him, but does that mean that he's going to usurp a third-year player who started to figure things out late last year, had a pretty decent spring game despite what some people say? I don't think so, because I think that the danger of putting a freshman out there is that you might have at your left tackle position more of those moments like Evan Link had last year, because he's getting used to playing college football, right? Not saying that will happen. I think that there's a risk factor there. And I think that there's less risk going with a guy who had those problems last year and seemed to kind of get things figured out afterwards. Otherwise, we barring injury, we know who's going to be three of the other guys. It's Giovanni El-Hadi, Greg Crippen, and Andrew Sprague. So that right tackle battle to me is the most, or right guard battle rather, is where we kind of look at. And Sharon Moore talking at Big Ten Media Days, mentioned Nathan Afobe. He was the guy there in the spring. He said all the right things in spring ball about the lights turning on for him. I didn't think he had like an beyond belief incredible spring game, but it wasn't like dismal or abysmal either. I would like to see a little bit more playability there. And then there's two guys that I feel are going to challenge him who do have playing time, and Lawrence Tatar, who had all that time at Ferris State, and Brady Norton, who had 1 year at Cal Poly. So I think that's kind of where the more interesting thing is. And ultimately, especially with someone like Brady Norton, I wouldn't be surprised to see him end up being in that kind of Trente Jones role, of being able to come in as a sixth lineman, because he has that experience of moving inside and outside. So that's kind of where I would not be surprised to see Afobe, or I think it's going to be probably more Afobe and Hatar. And then I wouldn't be surprised if we do see some Brady Norton regardless. But to me, that's that. Running back, you got the two, right? Like I don't think that's much of a surprise. Justice Haynes is my RB1 or RB1A, and then Jordan Marshall is RB1B. I know people are excited about Jordan Marshall. I think you should be putting some of that energy, not all of it, right? I think you should be putting some of that energy towards Justice Haynes. And I do think that they're both similar, but I think Haynes he's got something that just really excites me. And I think, again, I'm not trying to take away from Jordan Marshall. Both do. You're going to see plenty both. I would not be surprised if it's kind of like a Blake Hassan thing in terms of like, you don't know which one's going to have the better game any given Saturday. But I think that like Justice Haynes is someone that should be talked about much more from a national perspective. And if he was at Alabama in this kind of situation where like, okay, now he's going to be the starting running back, and Jalen Milroe is gone, I think that the narratives would be a little bit different, which is kind of bizarre because Michigan's such a run heavy team. Maybe it's because it didn't work out last year the way that it had in the previous three. So I think that that's going to be exciting. Tight end. You've got Marlon Klein, Hogan Hansen. Hansen appears to maybe be coming out of the offseason with an injury. I don't know if that'll set him back or not. And outside of that, like the field is just kind of there. Like Deacon Tonielli, Zach Marshall. We've heard some good things about those guys. Brady Prescorn. Again, coming off of injury, didn't see him in the spring game either. You just kind of wonder when, like the health and not figuring it out. You hope that kind of, you rise up above that. And then one of the players that I, for some reason, just don't talk about and should be talked about a heck of a lot more is Max Bredesen, who's technically a tight end. I mean, he is a fullback, but he's in the tight end room. I think you're going to see a lot of stuff happen for him in the pass game. And I think it's going to look a lot different. Remember, the first time we really saw Max Bredesen do anything was when he was a more nominal tight end and he caught a touchdown in the spring game. So like, don't be surprised if you see that team captain in there. And you can see in the spring game that there are packages for that. And Jalen Hoffman, who I think we'll see this year, went off doing that. So offense is going to be really interesting to watch in terms of a lot of the things that Chip Lindsey brings to the table, because we didn't really get a good glimpse of it in the spring game because of the split squad scenario. And then obviously wide receiver. We leave the best for last. No, I'm kidding. I'm not trying to be facetious here. I do think that it is somewhat underrated, because I do think that like the way they talk about Donovan McCulley, this doesn't feel like typical Michigan bluster, like Michigan camp bluster, right? Like it feels like he's like pretty legitimately, and I've heard some other accounts from some people who have seen some things. I would be surprised if he's not, at least surpassing his near 700-yard performance at Indiana a couple years ago. I think like he's really going to come on strong. I would say the other starters are probably Fred Moore and Samaj Morgan, but don't be surprised, and we'll get to some names later, but like, don't be surprised if like some of the old holdovers, I have a name that I'm going to save for now, but don't be surprised if like a Peyton O'Leary steps up, or a Maurian Stewart. Like we saw a lot of Channing Goodwin in the spring game, but at the same time, like I would not be surprised if we saw like a Marion Stewart, and then the freshmen are obviously going to be in play. I still am going to give you the caveat of just be reticent, just like have a little bit of understanding that we may or may not see like Andrew Marsh and Jamar Browder could burst onto the scene week 1 and you could be like, okay, all right, let's go. But it might not be that either. Right? Like every year I feel like we project a freshman wide receiver to step up and do something, and it tends to not happen. Lastly, everyone's sleeping on Anthony Simpson. Don't. Like, he's the most prolific guy that they had. And I know people look at it and say, well, he's UMass transfer. Well, he did start his career at Arizona. He knows what it takes to play in the Power 4 conference. And so I'm really curious to see what he's going to do. All right, we've got so much more, and that took a lot more time than I thought it was. We're going to do the defense, and then we're going to get to some players that are kind of those X factors. We're going to get to that all here in just a moment. But before we do, time to fuel up and turn it up with 5-Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor to your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Let's be honest, some days on the course or off of it, you just need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized. I know like that was the thing. One time I was in a league at Moose Ridge, not good at golf. Struggle at hitting it straight, struggle at hitting it anywhere because I topped the ball off a lot. And yet on the hardest hole 3 at Moose Ridge, if you've ever played there, I birdied it. It was just like an out of body experience. Golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors, of course. The grape ginger lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without chasing down the bev cart. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that's the number 5hourenergy.com. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONGOLF to receive 20% off of your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. This code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with some of your buddies or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through, order transfusion flavored 5-Hour Energy shots today. All right, let's get into the defensive side, of which there's much less turnover in terms of players you're going to see. Coaches, 0 turnover coaching wise, right? The whole staff is intact from last year. You saw the players come on. You saw them against Alabama. You got 10 deep in the front line, at least 3, if not maybe 5, on the next at the next level. Safety's loaded. Cornerbacks a little bit of a question mark in terms of the depth, but I think that there's a lot to like there. So let's start with the defensive line. The only one that I can sit there and say in the tackle position is a for sure starter is Rayshon Benny. And then who's next to him on snap 1? I don't know. It could be Trey Williams. It could be Damon Payne. It could be Enoetta. It could be Trey Pierce. It could be Ike Awuna. Any of those guys. And then you add in like some of those younger players who are starting to, I think, come on. David Pale, his name has come up a few times. Would not surprise me to see him, or even like a walk-on type like Chibi Anwana. Like I think like it would not surprise me a ton if a guy who's been around the program for a while, put on a lot of really good weight, if he, Michigan loves their walk-ons, if a guy like that ends up kind of working himself in a little bit too. But those 6 that I mentioned, like we know one starter for 100% sure, and then beyond that. But at the same time, like they've talked about it, like we've got 6 starters. That should be horrifying given how Michigan uses defensive tackles to opposing teams, right? Like it just should be absolutely horrifying. On the outside, you know who your starters are. Derek Moore, TJ Guy. I'm excited for both. I'm really excited about TJ Guy. Derek Moore is going to have, I would guess, more production ultimately, or at least just more cachet. But like TJ Guy, I think is going to like really surprise people. As a guy that like no one like nationally talks about. Like I think he's going to be one of those. I think he's going to have like that Chase Winovich type of year. But I don't think that Derek Moore is going to have like that Rashawn Gary type of year. I think he's going to yeah, I think he's like where it's like, oh man, he just didn't have the stats, maybe wasn't used the way that people thought he should be, all that kind of stuff. I think Derek Moore is going to get his share as well. I'm very optimistic about the defensive front, and that includes the linebackers. Really 3 starters, but the first 2 out of the gate are almost certainly going to be Butkus Award watch list players, Ernest Hausman, Jayshon Barham, who like it was a little bit surprising last year, the struggles there. Now, Ernest was a little bit more consistent than Jayshon, but it still wasn't quite what like you thought going in. But then by the end of the year, both were stellar. And I think you're going to see a big jump, right? Again, you get better at football by playing football. It tends to, like, when you see the arrow pointing up one year, then it tends to continue to go up the following year. And I think that's what's going to happen there. There's others that are going to be featured. Jimmy Rolder obviously is going to be a massive part. He's probably going to end up having about the same amount of snaps as those other 2, but he might not be the first guy out on the field. And then Cole Sullivan's someone that I think, you know, I've been excited about him just looking at him. He, even in my bowl game notes, practice notes, it was like, watch out for Cole Sullivan in the future. And he's talked about like that. So it's exciting to recognize that he might be really taking that step forward. I have another name I'm going to mention in segment 3 that I think that you're going to want to pay attention to as well. All right. Safety. A lot hinges on Rod Moore's health. He told Clayton Sayfie and the guys at the Wolverine, Chris Ballas and all those guys, Anthony Broom. I don't want to leave anybody out, but Clayton's the one who put it out. So easy to give him the credit. But Rod Moore said he's kind of at 85% essentially health-wise. Probably up a little bit higher now. It's just going to be like, how quickly can he get back to being Rod Moore? That's the big thing. Can he get back to being that dominant player? In 2023, he missed the first couple games, and it took him a little while. So understand that is a possibility, but they also love, I would venture to guess that Brandon Hillman would be starting alongside him. And then if it's not Rod Moore, then who's going to be in that free safety spot? They've got so many options of guys that could do that. I know that probably the first name on everyone's mind would be like Mason Curtis, who's had a year in the program. I'm telling you, TJ Metcalf, someone had told me that they were like, that's the name to know. That is the name to know in the defensive back room is TJ Metcalf. Like someone with knowledge, not just like a guy I ran into while I was walking Zuri or something, right? Like, so he would be the one that I would really have my eye on. But I mean, there's so many that you could look at, right? You could add Tevis in there. You could add you could add Jaron Mangum, but you know, Mason Curtis, TJ Metcalf, and I think that's an interesting room. And then even like some of the freshmen, nickel. I'm not really sure where that's going to go. They're kind of testing out a lot of different guys. Jair, Zeke Berry can go back. I don't think they're going to do that given how well he played outside. You know, again, one of the Metcalf brothers could be there. It could be Mason Curtis, who they've worked there to be a Kyle Hamilton style. That's kind of open. I don't really have a good beat on that. But cornerback, I have a name to watch, but really it's just, again, it's the, I think I'd be very surprised if it wasn't Jair and Zeke out on the boundary. I think that you're going to see a little bit of a resurgence there, like just a little bit stronger play compared to early season last year. If nothing else, I think it will look kind of like the month of November, and sometimes that won't be great. And then, you know, how quickly can Josiah Edmond and Shamari Earls come on? Josiah we saw a little bit last year, Shamari being a true freshman, but has that kind of Will Campbell je ne sais quoi about him. I think that those would be the ones, but I do have a name I'm going to bring up here on the other side here in just a moment. All right, so there are a couple people that I think that if they have a really good fall camp, which is like, don't think that this is like some kind of fever dream. It's certainly something that is possible. Then the narrative could change quite a bit, and that usually does happen. Guys come from out of nowhere all the time. Whether it's a freshman, I think like Chris Evans, you know, like like no one really thought it was in 2016. Like, oh yeah, Chris Evans is going to be a big part of this. right? Like there's always guys. Ike won last year that come on strong, and you know, even like Peyton O'Leary got so much talk a couple years ago when Jim Harbaugh in 2021 called him like Cooper Kupp, and it was all kinds of stuff, right? Like, I mean, granted, that didn't end up working that way. Sometimes you get all the camp buzz and just nothing happens. But like, I have a couple candidates that I think could be some of those guys. I mean, some of them are like guys we saw in the spring game: Jalen Hoffman, Bryson Cusdahl. I'm also curious to see guys who played at the lower level that transferred in, the two running backs, John Volker and CJ Hester. What are they able to do? The one that I'm probably among the most curious about is Kendrick Bell, last year's inflection player on this show, because they are going to go a little bit more pass heavy. I'm not saying that like it's probably not going to even be 50-50. It's still probably going to favor the run game, I would guess. But you know, it didn't really fully work for him, and then we didn't really hear from him in the spring game or spring ball because he was injured. And you look at it and you say, okay, well, that was his first year playing wide receiver. 70 yards on 7 catches, no touchdowns. More capable quarterback play, and a scheme that could feature him a little bit more. Jerome Moore talked about him as, you know, challenging Donovan McCulley, like for that X position. Like, I think that, you know, you're not going to see McCulley out on the field every play. This could be a moment where Kendrick Bell really takes that step forward. And I mentioned Anthony Simpson. I think that people are sleeping on him. He very well could end up being a starter but he's a little behind the 8 ball as a late transfer addition. So then you get to some of the other guys. I don't really have one on tight end. As far as like offensive line, I think we kind of know the names, right? Like really, like there's those guys at right guard. But I am curious because of the freshmen, like, could like a Ty Haywood, who's more of a right tackle, could he like end up showing something enough where they're like, we're going to cross train you at guard because we just might want to put you on the field. Like, that's a possibility. I'm, again, not a strong one, but there are some of those guys. And I really want to see if like a guy like Connor Jones can turn it on, because he just hasn't done that yet. Or some of those second-year players, Hambo, as they call him, Luke Hamilton. I'd be interested to see what he's able to do. I thought he looked pretty good in the spring game. And, you know, or maybe like even like Ben Roebuck, I didn't think had the best spring game. It would be interesting to see him, like, can he have a better fall camp? So there's that. Going back to the defensive side of the ball, rather. Troy Bowles, not getting talked about. Son of Todd Bowles, Tampa Bay Buccaneers head coach. Was at Georgia, who stacks linebackers the way that Ohio State stacks wide receivers. Injured in spring ball, so we didn't hear a lot from him. I will tell you that a name you all know is like, watch out for that guy when he's healthy. Just like straight up, like he's going to be so freaking good. So he's someone that like we talked about, you know, you talk about some of those other guys. You talk about Jimmy Rolder, you talk about Cole Sullivan, or even the two true freshmen. I feel like there's a lot to really like about Troy Bowles. And then the other name that I'm really interested in, I mean, I'll give you two. I mentioned Jaron Mangum, who was a starter at Michigan State, has a lot of talent, had some injuries last year, amongst other things. Can he put it together in this scheme? I'm curious about. But the name that I teased before, it's Caleb Anderson, the transfer from Louisiana. In spring ball, there was some talk about him having that Amir Hall or Josh Wallace ascent, and he's long, man. And like, he didn't do much at Louisiana, but that does not mean that he can't figure things out here, because it just seems like there's a little bit of buzz around him. And, you know, they like length in that defensive backfield. He absolutely could be a guy. But if I was to try to pick, like, who are some of those guys who are really going to do it this year, I would really look heavily at TJ Metcalf. Like, I think like he would probably be one that, and like TJ Metcalf, Donovan McCulley, Anthony Simpson, I think are going to be the types of players. And I know those are all transfers that people aren't really talking about a heck of a lot that end up being like, oh man, where's this guy been? I think that those are those guys. And then I think the last thing is like which freshmen end up getting in. And this is where they can do it. Like, you know, the bridge program, all that makes it harder, but that's where it's like the early enrollees are going to have a little bit of a leg up. You know, that's where I wouldn't be surprised, despite like the loaded room, if like a Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng gets some time. You know, Jasper Parker is not an early enrollee, but it would not surprise me if he ended up being that Chris Evans type. And it's like, yeah, no, they're going to, he might end up being running back number 3. Like, he's certainly capable of being that. They absolutely love him and what he did in high school. So excited to see where it goes. But that's going to do it for our fall camp preview. Hard to believe in some ways that football is here, right? We are waiting our first fall camp press conference. We are a month away from the season opener. It is really happening. So the march on to the season begins now. But for now, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. Not sure yet what day we have our celebrity season-long guest starting, if it's going to be tomorrow or Friday. And whatever day that's not, we'll do the mailbag. That is the plan for the rest of the week. Anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again soon. Peace.